have talked before, we have our navigators, we have our preservers, and we have our transmitters. And transmitters are tend to be focused on this idea of attracting and bonding. And the awareness to action goes on to say that they'll kind of define this as like, this is kind of this energy of wanting to pass on something, well, genes, beliefs, values, interests, your worldviews to others in order for them to be able to carry that information into the future or out into the world. Transmitting leaders tend to be charismatic and bold, really good at articulating a goal or a vision, moving and inspiring others towards it. Kind of intuitively understanding maybe the market, the customer, being persuasive as they sell products, the company, a dream, a vision to the internal team. Good at building relationships with customers and partners, can be a little competitive there, good at maybe the startup phase of a business or maybe starting a department within a business. Or I know you recently founded your own business. Dee, we'll talk about that. And sometimes they may struggle with focusing too much attention on themselves, accomplishing what they're accomplishing, what they want to achieve, and may neglect their career development of maybe the team members they're leading. And then sometimes they may be guilty of putting their self-focus onto their own interests before a company. Now, there's to your point earlier, there's kind of different levels of how aware someone is. So whether, transmitters do all of these, I don't think is the case at all, but that kind of gives us a refresher, a recap of what that transmitting energy is like. What about the transmitting do you see in your own life, the work that you do? What kind of led you to think, okay, this might be where I am over here?
So remember I was telling you that, you know, with the styles, um, there were some questions, right? Even sometimes, and I didn't talk about this one, but even sometimes questioning if I'm even in the seven space. Um, but you know what never is a question? It's which instinctual bias.
Yeah.
There's no question because all the things that you named, all the things, I will say yes and like all
Yes.
the things. And in my growth journey, which is a continuous journey, I will say I've been in all those spaces where I find myself sometimes asking, am I am I making this about me? Or am I really thinking about the team? But one thing, like to your point, you talk about even in companies, like I always looked at myself as an entrepreneur,
Mm.
right? Um, and if anyone listening is like, what the heck is an entrepreneur? Uh, an entrepreneur is that person that even when I worked in companies, I operated as though it was my company, right? So I made choices that were going to help the company from my perspective, right? That were going to help the company move forward, that were going to help people move forward. So I always think about that, even when I was in the military. So in the Army's motto was mission first, people always. But as a leader, personally, I switched that around and I said, no, people first, mission always. And the reason why is because for me, my mindset was if I take care of the people, they will take care of the mission. And
Mm.
so that's the way I lead. And that's I think one of the things that can keep me grounded to not get too caught up in self. Um, One of my personal mottos is dream big, live large, stay humble and kind. And um that's important for me because again, it makes me right, it's what I aspire to do. I won't say I'm always there. So that's like my aspiration is, is the dream big. I think I'm always there. I'm always thinking crazy ideas. The live large, I'm for the most part doing that out there, making it happen. to stay humble can be a challenge for a transmitting three.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, you got the transmitting and the three. Woo!
Because I mean, honestly, even taking on this interview and being here right now, right? It's like, okay, all right, I get to talk about me.
I get it. I get it. Yeah.
Oh,
Well, and listeners cannot see. We may show some clips on YouTube, but every single time I've seen you, I think you've been wearing a suit. Like
yeah.
and then you always have this hat and you're just it's so put together. It's like you came out of like a catalog every time. So and that's one of the things. And it's interesting because I think that's maybe like that textbook 3 sometimes is like, "Oh, I imagine that," but it's also very transmitting. They will say, like, one of the things to consider is this kinda dress to impress.
Oh yeah. Well, because it helps you to transmit, right?
Mhm.
It helps to, pretty much, broadcast. And so you walk into a room and your folks are gonna notice, right? And then I'm sure we'll probably get to this, but then I can narrowcast, right? Once I know, I'm like, oh, look, I got all, and now where do I want to shoot my focus? Um, and so
Well,
yeah,
let's
so
let's
it
talk about
helps.
that because that was one of, that's kinda just one of the seems like a small clarification point, but, I really like the way the awareness to action talks about that narrow casting and then or broadcasting and then narrow casting. And
Mhm.
sometimes I think maybe that's where that one to one, sometimes we'll call it this subtype like sexual or like one to one if we can't say those words.
Yes.
And it's like, well, that's not entirely the whole story. What would you add anything or what would you add to that?
Yeah, no, so what I think what happens to your point, we're trying to get people to walk away with whatever it is that we're trying to share with them, right? In whatever way that is. And so it feels like so folks will always say, you make me feel like in the moment, you make me feel like I'm the only one in the room. Um, once we get to that point, right? Once we've narrowcasted. And at the same time, I know folks will also say that sometimes I feel like you want to give your attention to everyone else but me, right? Depending on what that looks like. And so, what I would say is, we are because once we feel that you are that we're connected, right? We want to give you the thing. And so I have a lot of folks in my life, and I know we'll probably get to this, but I have a lot of folks in my life that are navigators. Um, and they will talk about their struggle that people don't ask them questions and people don't want to know about them. And people are so apt to just talk about themselves and they're like, and so then they don't know how to be in the conversation. And I snicker because I'm like, I have no problems being in the conversation and I have no problems with getting whatever message I want into the conversation because if I need to, I will definitely introduce it. I will find a way to introduce that thing. And I know that can be annoying for some folks. And again, now that I'm aware of that, I can also pull it back when I need to. Matter of fact, I'm on a journey now, and as you know, in the awareness to action space, we we use the peacock as a we use a peacock as a way to talk about transmitters, right? And what that looks like, and just the whole dance that the peacock does to be able to do their thing. And I'm on a journey right now to definitely still embrace my peacock, but also I'm looking at things now in a way to say, yeah, that's important, but how can I be more of an eagle? I'm using
Mm.
birds, right? And how can I be more of an eagle and kind of be there in the tree and be perched and just look at things, right? And as a three, as a transmitting, as a person that operates as a transmitting three, I look at myself a lot of times as a human doing versus a human being. Right? I'm always doing. And if you ask me any question about anything relational or anything like that, my thing is, well, what can I do? Right? What can I do for you? How can I, And so I'm really practicing on be, being in that human. See, it was even hard for me to say it.
Yeah, it's like choking on the word. Yeah.
But really being in that space of being and being more like the eagle and surveying and then coming in when I need to come in and not feeling like I have to always be in that space. Um, and I'm working with a coach, and she used a really great analogy, a metaphor, I would say, for me. She's like, Demetrius, you remind me of the ringmaster. And I was like, wow, like why? And when she shared with me, and it really resonated, was she's like, even though the ringmaster is a part of the show, everyone is always still have their eyes on the ringmaster, no matter what part of the show is going on. And there's an expectation that the ringmaster is going to perform and be ready. Like the ringmaster always has to be ready because if something goes wrong, it's the ringmaster's job to then step in and keep things continuous. And so I was like, wow, it was really, really mind blowing to hear that metaphor used because I do feel as a transmitting three, that is a thing. And to the point where even sometimes people start to kind of look at us as that we want to always be on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's some folks in my life that we've had these discussions and they go, "Oh, you don't mind." And it's like, no, actually, sometimes I do. Like sometimes I just want to just sometimes just be there. And at the same time, I built, and I feel like maybe some other transmedia things have built this space where people automatically assume that this is how we will show up and that we want to show up that way all the time.
Yeah, but
Um,
maybe you're saying you kind of feel like that's what people expect.
yeah, exactly. It's become an expectation. And then don't get me wrong. Like I would say if I use my 80-20 rule, I will say 80% of the time they are right. But there is that 20 where I'm like, no, I don't necessarily want that attention. I don't necessarily want that responsibility. Um, I want other folks to have that spotlight. Um, and at the same time, I would say it is probably also easy to transition out of that space.